Welcome to Extreme Reloading episode number 3, season number 10. If you missed our last episode, let me do a quick recap. What we did in the last episode is we prepared the brass. Well, it's brand new factory brass, but there's still a little bit of preparation that was necessary. That part is all done, and now in this episode we're going to be working up the load. Actually, 2 different loads with Peterson brass and Lapua brass. The Peterson brass is going to get some Berger bullets. The Lapua brass is going to get some Hornady bullets. And we're loading them all with Federal Gold Medal Match Magnum Large Rifle, primers, and H1000 from Hodgdon. Let's get busy. Well, I'm going to go ahead and work up the load. I've got 10 Lapua brass cases absolutely ready to go, and 10 Peterson brass cases for this 300 PRC. Now, this is a brand new process, brand new procedure, brand new caliber for me. So I am going to be using, I've got a lot of experience with this. This is a 21st century priming tool. I think it's called Gen 2. Very fine adjustments on this thing here, but it's currently set for the 308 Winchester. So I have a different shell holder here for the 300 PRC that I need to change out, and so more or less I'm tooling up for the 300 PRC. Before I start any of my actual loading though, I'm going to fill out my reloading log. I don't have any previous notes to even compare other than a little bit of work that we did prepping these cases. But I will again be loading those 10 Peterson, 10 Lapua cases, 20 in total. Here's something interesting. I always measure the outside diameter of the necks when I'm first getting all this stuff started. And what's interesting is that the Peterson was consistently at 0.334. Lapua 0.335. Now there's nothing too much special about that other than the fact they are slightly different, which might end up giving me a slightly different neck tension at the end of this loading process. But I need to get these things primed. As you can see, they are unprimed right now. I will be using, these are large Magnum rifle match primers, Federal 215Ms. Before I can even do that, I've got to get this thing set. So I'm going to take this thing apart. And the only part I have to remove in this case is just the shell holder. This is shell holder number 2 for the 308. I'm going to be using shell holder number 5 for the 300 PRC. Yeah, they're both 308 caliber bullets, but the head diameter of these cases is really different. I'm going to get it relatively close to how I had it for the 308. Now let's say about there. What I do is I'm going to watch. Okay, I can see that the actual ram is protruding a fair amount here. I'm going to back it out a little bit. Whoop. Now that's a good starting point. Understand that when you're first setting this thing up, as I'll say, tooling up, I will start with a very, very shallow prime. But then by the time I'm finished with that first case, I will get this adjusted exactly as I want it with a very nice recess. We can always seat it deeper, but we can't pull that primer out and seat it less, right? So we've got to do this right the very first time. I've got my primers dispensed in my tray right here. I am now going to walk in, wash my hands really well, get everything off my hands, degrease these things, and then I'll be right back. I try to handle the primers as little as possible. And I also like to work at this stuff as systematically as possible. So therefore, I'm going to be working on this case block from right to left, and moving the finished cases essentially going to be put into the same position that they were here. Now, that is not enough recess. In fact, it's still protruding out of the case head. That's how I like it when I'm starting to get this set. So now let's drop this down a few thousandths. Seated it just a little bit more. I can tell that it is still protruding. Let me keep at this a little bit. Okay, I think we've got it. Let's go to our second case and see how this is. I have a nice slight recess in it. Might want just a little bit more. Let me go one click more. Yeah, that's nice. Now I'll tell you, I'm working, as you can see, on the Peterson brass now, and there is really a noticeable difference. The Lapua brass, the primers were quite tight. You could actually feel almost like certain steps as this would seat the primer. The Peterson brass, for what it's worth, very smooth, not as tight as the primer pockets on the Lapua. Does that matter? Well, no, it doesn't matter, other than the fact that they're different. And I'm curious to see how that plays out in the future as we continue loading for this 300 PRC. There's the last one. Nice recess on all of these. Very similar, I would say probably identical recess on these primers for both the Peterson and the Lapua brass cases. Okay, now that step is done, and now the next step is obviously to add the powder charge. I'll be using H1000, but different powder charges in every one of these different cases. I've got to be very, very careful and pay very close attention to what I'm doing to make sure that, let's say this is case number 1, which will have the lowest powder charge, and this is case number 10. I need to make sure that I keep very good track on this, so I fire case number 1 first, and then eventually case number 10. Same thing over here. All right, this is the last case of my Peterson brass. Last case that needs to have a powder charge in it. I am loading 78.0 grains, that's the final powder charge of H1000 into this. And the Peterson brass cases are going to be topped, or are being topped, with the 220 grain Berger bullets. So far, so good. Let me tell you, this H1000 is some chunky stuff. I first started throwing this at a powder speed of 2, which is what I use for my RL15. I had to decrease that to a slower rate, to the slowest it can go, a dispenser speed of 1, which is the same speed that I use for Varget. Once it's at that slower speed, I notice it does a pretty darn nice job. So let's go ahead and key this in. 78.0, go. Yeah, did a nice job. pour this in slowly. Don't lift the funnel on these big powder charges. Don't lift the funnel too fast. And a little wiggle right there helps it. Make sure that when you do lift it, you're not going to be spilling some kernels that may have kind of remained in this. Just a little bit of care takes care of all that. Okay, let's head outside and pop the bullet into this final case. This is one of my Berger bullets, 220 grain, long and sleek bullet, without a doubt. Very long boat tail on this. Pretty small meplat right there. Now, loading these long cases in this press, I've done it before, 338 Win Mag. Largest one I've ever loaded in here is the 416 Rigby. A little bit interesting how you do this, but it works. And I've got this set exactly as it's supposed to be for cartridge overall length. There we go. Now that did a nice job. I've been watching every one of these bullets as that goes through the seating stem, and I'm not seeing any marring at all. I haven't tried it, of course, with the original OEM bullet seating stem, but no complaints here. This is very nice. And I have seen some other complaints of some of the bullet seating stems were marring up these bullets. And you know, for a long-range precision rifle, you want to have those bullets in as good a shape as possible. Now here's the other thing that I'm doing. I keep my factory ammo boxes. Just happen to have a box of Berger, so that reminds me. And I put notes on these also on the outside. I'll put a sticker on this. This is my Berger bullets, and that happens to be round number 10. What I do, and this happens to be a box of Hornady match. These have been shooting really, really well for me. I've got some spent cases in it from previous shooting. That's okay. I put a little bit of tape on here, and I'll write 1, 2, 3, 4 through 10, right? And that's all I'm going to be shooting for this initial load workup. And then as I finish load 1 and 2 and so on, I just keep pushing it further and further and further into the box. So just in case the whole thing flips over, I don't have to start like all over and wonder, well, which one was number 1 and which one was number 2? Again, pretty darn important really to do that. The other thing I noticed is I take this one, even at the, I don't know if you could hear that, but even at the maximum charge of 78 grains, it is not a compressed load, which is interesting also because I don't hear that much shaking when I do the same thing with some of that factory ammo that I've been shooting. Again, doesn't really matter, probably a different powder, but I will note that just as a comment and also something to remember as we're evaluating these rounds later on. So this takes care of the Peterson brass Berger bullets. That one gets set aside. Now I'm going to repeat the process essentially using the Lapua brass and the Hornady bullets. Now while we're at it, I promised you early on in this season of extreme reloading that I would open this box with you. As you can see, it has not been opened. I haven't snuck in there and taken a look at this, so let's go ahead and do this. As I said, looks like quite a bit of marketing goes into this box. Oh my, they got it sealed up. This nice foil seal all over the place. Let's see how they got this set up. I see, sort of like an egg crate. My goodness. Actually, I don't even see eggs taking care of this well. They also give you this little rag right here. I've heard about this, I read about this. What you need to do, what you're supposed to do, is put the bullets in this and kind of clean them up a little bit. So let's go ahead and put at least some of the bullets in this. We'll set this box aside. we're going to be using 10 of these bullets, so let's go ahead and prep 10 of them. There it is. Now this is also interesting. I don't know if you've seen some of the news about this, the press releases about this, but take a look at that Mepla. Look at that, how flat it is. This is actually quite an innovation by Hornady, what they've been able to do, and they've got a patent on this, what they've been able to do by flattening this by this size relative to the caliber of the bullet itself is to greatly reduce the variation of drag. They're not reducing the drag so much by this, that's done by the shape of the bullet, but reducing the variation of drag or drag variability. So that's kind of cool. We're going to see if it makes a difference though. We won't be able to tell as we're shooting 100 or 200 or anything like that yards. But when we start stretching it out, 900 yards, 1,000 yards, those sort of things, we'll see it. Let me get these cleaned up. There's 10 of them just for what we're doing today. Going to kind of clean them up a little bit as they recommend. I'm not going to smash them up though. Got to be careful with that. I don't think I really have to use that bag. They look no worse for the wear. And we'll get these ready to be loaded. Now, back inside to charge these Lapua cases with that same H1000, but of course, because we're using a heavier bullet, it's a different weight range for these powder charges. And this is the final case, Lapua case with the Hornady A-TIP 230 grain. Everything's going very well. Powder charges are exactly as I wanted them. And once again, you'll notice that with that ELD seating stem, it looks very nice. That is it, number 10. Now I'd like to get, sort of for my own curiosity, but also for good record keeping and future reference, I'd like to get a measure of cartridge-based ogive for each of these rounds that I'm loading and firing. We want to make sure that we're parallel here to here and there. Now with these long cases, there is plenty of room for us to make a mistake. But there we have 2.800 is the CBTO for the Berger bullet. Now let's do the same thing. A-TIP match, 230 grain bullet. Carefully get a measure on this one. Just as an estimate or approximation. I don't need to measure all of them. I don't want to do that. That would provide an opportunity to mix them up 1 through 10. I don't want that. It's looking pretty good for a measurement, maybe 2.820, I'll call that. You know, whenever you're working up a brand new load, it takes a while. You got to be so careful. You should be so careful. Setting the bullet seating die, 2 different bullets, working up each of those loads, being very, very careful, absolutely systematic, absolutely the correct powder charge in each one of those cases. Takes a little while to get all that stuff done, but we did it. That is all done. I now have 20 rounds, 10 each, ready for the range. And that is going to be the topic of our next episode. So, until then, take care and thanks for watching.